That's not what I want because this is not okay. Is it under discussions? Yep, it is. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. There we go. Come back to. All right, I was going to put this link in the chat just for extra reading because we're doing um, milestone testing. I did not. Okay, why would it share? All right, I shared in the chat the link that would take you to this in case you, after Earth Day, or you get tired of studying, you might want to read up on some things on Earth Day. Earth Day, it technically was yesterday. It's April 22nd every year. And what I'm having my non-testing classes do is to go to the site because we're trying to make sure that we are good global citizens and we want to make sure we save the planet, especially you all, because the rest of the future is yours and you want to make sure that the future planet that you have is well maintained. So there's some good reading activities at this website. We finished letting some more folks in. All right, so that's just extra. If and I put the link in the chat, like I said, and I'll put it again since several people just came in. You probably won't get the link. All right, so there we go. Since most of you are in now. So again, yesterday was Earth Day. Most of my classes, especially the environmental classes, had to do activities from this website. Every year they have a theme. The theme this year is Our Power, Our Planet. And if you need some extra reading things to do when you're not studying for your test tomorrow, you can come here. All of these red headings are hyperlinks, so you can click on any of them. It'll take you to another article to read. Okay, so these are all hot topics that we are checking out this year. All right, so I think I got most people here. So we'll go ahead and go back to our lovely little Milestone worksheet. So if you pull that up, we got as far as question 55 yesterday, I believe. 55 of 99. Mm. Natalie, yesterday you put a link up. Um, could you put that link up again, please? As an alternate uh, place to go study. Okay, we're gonna try to get through these, and if we run out of this, we'll pop over to the link that Natalie's going to share, and we'll take a look at that too. All right, we had gotten to 54. We make this a little bigger. Okay, and again, we talked about the fact on this question. It says which one is most closely related, and they're most closely related because they're in the same genus. The house cat and the lynx are in the same genus, they just have a different species name. Again, organisms are have a like you have a first and last name, scientifically speaking, and this is scientific classification, just to give it another heading. It's got several headings. We're under taxonomy, we're under binomial nomenclature, meaning two-word system of naming. And so we name things by the genus and species. Genus is always capital, species is lowercase. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we'll look at that as soon as, thank you, Natalie. As soon as we get finished going through this one. All right, 55. An organism has the following characteristics. It has membrane-bound organelles, eukaryotic. It's multicellular, meaning more than one cell, does not carry out photosynthesis, so it's not a plant, has no cell walls, again, not a plant, reproduces sexually. Which of the following must it be? And so it's an since it's multicellular, it's animalia. It could be it's not eubacteria, although eubacteria have what's the other one that says membrane bound organelles. It is because it is multicellular and reproduces sexually, it is animalia. Okay, so you have to go through all of these characteristics to get to read out all of these other ones. Which of the following 54 was lynx? Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And we said if you looked at the chart again, if you got as far as genus, the house cat and the lynx are in the same genus, but then that's what makes them closely related. Okay. All right, and 55 is B animalia. Okay, okay. And then how I went through the list, that's how you need to read each one carefully. Say, well, if it's got this characteristic, that weeds out the other kingdoms. So that's how you need to go through that. Which of the following would provide the best evidence to support the claim that two organisms have common ancestry? Like I said, my answer key is slightly different to those sometimes. Oops, looking at the wrong one. I don't know where I got that from. All right, similarly featured similarity of anatomical features. I mean, that's body parts. Okay, if they have a wing that looks And although some look at that as an arm, it's similar. You look at how that structure is similar on all the organisms that you're trying to say have similar ancestry. All right. Phylogenetic tree. And you've got, let me see, can't make it any bigger. I can. There you go. All right, so this one is for plants. So they start with algae, and then they move into mosses, ferns. So these are green plants in particular. Mosses, simple ones would be mosses and liverworts. And what is that? It says they live on land, not in the water. They have true vascular systems. Vascular system, like we have arteries and veins, plants have a xylem and phloem. And that's their vascular system, and that's how they get water and food up to all the parts of this the plant. We talked about yesterday that the fact that the water falls on top, it rains on the plant, that's not how the plant gets its water. The water actually has to go down in the ground, be pulled up by its vascular system to get to where it needs to go. Early seeds appear, so those are gymnosperms, and flowering plants are angiosperms. So that's just their definition. A gymnosperm is a seed-bearing plant, and the angiosperm is a flowering plant, which means it reproduces sexually. Gymnosperms may reproduce asexually. All right, so that being said, and again, study all of the based on the diagram, what was the most recent evolutionary development? That means the thing furthest away from the beginning would be angiosperms, and they say that these two are flowering plants. If we're looking at the circles, those represent the evolutionary developments which separate the branches. Okay, so that would be flowering plants. Um, questions. All right, another cladogram. The diagram shows different organisms, and then this is just in general. It is most reasonable to expect the greatest similarities in anatomical characteristics between which two groups. Remember, the lines that are closest to each other are most closely related. That is the rule. So it's going to be 4 and 5. Because they tend to be your other choice was 3 and 4. 4 and 5 are more closely related because they kind of stem from the same piece of the rock. So that is the most, and you go most evolved as you go up the list. So the ones that are closest related are going to be 4 and 5 and not 3 and 4. They're close, but not closest. Or in this case, the word that and then look for key. Tegan is not in this class, so why is Tegan logged in trying to get in? All right, Tegan, you're in the wrong class. That was last class. All right, so again, when you're reading questions, look for keywords like greatest, least, small, that type of thing. All right, 59. All right, another cladogram, except this one actually has animals on it. It starts off by telling you these all have a backbone, so they're all vertebrates. Some have a bony skeleton, some have a soft, what they call a collagenous. Cartilage is like the tip, what you have in the tip of your nose. It gives you support, but it's flexible. What you have in your ears, it gives support, but it's flexible. So that's cartilage as opposed to bone structure. The appearance of two traits, backbone and bony skeleton, are shown. Which of the other labeled points on the cladogram would most likely be predicted to represent the trait for a hairy body? Okay. All right. So you're looking at the letters A, B, C, and D going up the cladogram. They all, everybody from, all right, he said B. Um, what they're saying with B is everything above there uh, would also include D, like you said, but more specifically, the answer is C because it kind of branches up, and that C branch branches, okay? And those have hairy bodies on them. So C has hairy bodies as opposed to our crocodile and birds. Feathers are not considered to be hair. And so it kind of, B does separate from the frogs and amphibians and things with scale and slimy skin. But when we get to C, C also branches into the primates and rodents. So they have hair as opposed to crocodiles and birds. So C is the correct answer on this one. Does everybody see that? So in other words, B and D are still part of bony skeleton, but then we branch off from being a bony skeleton to a more specific characteristic. Malik, that makes sense? Okay. All right. Looking at 60, the diagram represents 5 different organisms. The appearance of a certain trait X is kind of in the middle of the line there. Evolutionary history in based on the information from the diagram, which of the following best represents all the organisms that would exhibit trait X? So that means whatever they started with, trait X didn't start appear until after the second branch. So um, everybody after that little mark there, and then because it's appeared on that solid line, everybody after that branch has that characteristic. Okay, so that would be 3, 4, and 5. So which answer is that? That's C. 3, 4, and 5. Because that solid line represents the basic characteristic that all those branches are going to have. So if it appeared kind of in the middle here between 2 and 3, then everything after that point is going to have that characteristic. That makes sense? All right. Unlike living organisms, a virus requires what in order to replicate? And this is important. We didn't, I don't know if we talked about viruses a lot, but viruses are not considered to be living things, although they can reproduce, which is a character. We talked about Miss Grin, but Miss Grin was all of the characteristics of living things. They have to you give that's an acronym for all of the characteristics that you have to do. And one of those, the R is for respiration, the other R is for reproduce. And what cannot, what do um what do they need in order to? They have DNA, they can replicate, but what do they have to have to replicate? You know? A, yes, thank you, Natalie. They have to have a host cell, a living cell, okay, that has DNA that it can replicate. Okay, so they want your cells to do all the work. Your cells will read their information, and when they go to the ribosomes to replicate, they're going to replicate the virus and not your information. But they can't do that on their own. So they don't have ribosomes. They can't make copies of themselves. And although they have genetic information, they need to go in a host cell and have the host cell replicate them, and then the host cell will replicate viruses. All right, 62. One difference between bacteria and viruses is Bacteria are living things, viruses are not. Bacteria can replicate themselves, viruses cannot. 63. Which of the following best describes the difference between genetic material of virus and a bacteria? And again, um, see the viruses have less genetic material and fewer genes than a bacteria. They only have a short strand. So they do have, like I said, genetic material, and it's a short strand. It's not long and complicated, like because it only has to replicate itself. So it only has information for making a virus. It doesn't have information for making all the parts of the body. So the genetic material is small and has fewer genes on it than a bacterial cell would have. All right. Which of the following statements correctly describes the similarity between viruses and how they reproduce? So you want to complete the sentence, both viruses and bacteria. D, have to copy their entire genetic material before reproducing. So that's how they're the same. The only difference is the virus needs to put their information in. So they actually sit on the cell, inject it into the cell, and the cell will then pick up that viral information and make a copy. The bacteria doesn't need to do that. All right. Which of the following correctly describes the energy use and growth of virus and bacteria? Viruses, D. Viruses, A. They don't use energy to grow because they don't grow. Bacteria need energy to grow because they have to reproduce. The virus injects its DNA into the cell, so the cell is using the energy to reproduce the virus, not the virus. All right, the graph. There is no graph, but if there was one, as well, okay, you can't answer this question. The answer is going to be B, but do you have no graph? So we kind of have to ignore this. But most of the time when you get a question like this, it's a can you read the graph question? So you simply have to know what the X and the Y axis are telling you and run your finger across it in order to find the numbers that match. But you can't do this question because there is no graph attached, like they say. So ignore that one. But know that there sometimes will be graphs. All right, which of the following observations lead to classification of gopher tortoise as a keystone species in Georgia? Okay, keystone species means it's important to the environment. If we took it out of the environment, it would create a ripple effect as far as other organisms in that in the coastal area of Georgia. And A, create habitats for hundreds of other species by digging underground burrows. When, all right, so when they create these burrows, other organisms live there. So they are helpful in that way. All right, A3, spot and sickleback fish is a small fish that lives in fresh water. Which of the following would be a limiting factor affecting the population of this lovely fish? Limiting factors are factors that are things that you need to live, like food, water, shelter, those things. So it would die if it didn't have them. And that would be T, the volume of water in the body of water in which the fish lives. All right. So the thing that's in the water too is dissolved oxygen. If it's got a little bit of water, then it's also going to have a little bit of dissolved oxygen. It could suffocate in a small amount of water. So when the water levels go down, we have large numbers of fish that will die. All right, so this one actually has a graph. So if we look at the graph, you have a key on the side. And so each one of those lines represents a different behavior of different species. All right, based on this, you have 4 different species. 68 was D. Yes. All righty. 69. Based on the data provided, which species reached carrying capacity in its habitat first? All right, so again, the unit that we didn't get to is ecology, so you want to make sure you read up on that unit a little bit as well. But this would go with that carrying capacity. When you look at a graph like this, there's always a cap to the graph, and then things start going downhill after they reach carrying capacity. What carrying capacity means is the organisms in that environment can function well with the resources that they have until they start using them all up. So that is the carrying capacity. They can survive really well and have enough resources, water, sunlight, um, places to live until they reach a certain point. And that's the carrying capacity. Once they start running out of water, space, food, that kind of thing, then the graph starts going down. That means they start dying. Okay. So the answer for this one is species 4. Okay. Species 4 doesn't last is the one that lasts the least of all of them. So theirs is not going up. Theirs kind of gets to a certain point about 30 and then it starts to level off. So that's its carrying capacity. Wherever it levels off, that's its carrying capacity. The others, 3 would come next. 2 would come after that, and 1 seems to has not reached carrying capacity yet. So the ones that seem to level off, that's their carrying capacity. Yes. Malik said the one that caps the least is the answer. So yes, the one that its resources happen. What is that? When the popping. In other words, that environment. If we're looking at what the other side is saying, only 100 members of species 4 can survive in that environment. So it capped off. More than 100, then they would start to die. So you can have, let's see, 200 of species 3. You can have 250 of species 2. And species 4 has not reached its cap yet. That's how you would read that graph. All right. Which of the following environmental changes will most likely be the greatest loss of biodiversity in the habitat? Biodiversity again means a variety of organisms. So we're looking at that in one given area, what factor would cause the least amount of organisms to be present? And that would be A, deforestation in a rainforest. You've cut down the trees and lots of things live in the tree, on the tree, around the tree. So you really destroy plants and animals. There are plants that live on the tree. One of my favorite, and this is an old movie, but it had Sean Connery and some other people. It was called Medicine Man, and they were looking for the cure for cancer. And this flower grew at the very top of a tree. And then the contractors were coming in to cut down the whole forest. And he was just on the tip of research of finding what was the cure to cancer in that flower that was on the top of the tree. So cutting down the trees will create a great loss. All right. The energy that animals need to carry out their life functions is released when their cells complete which of the following functions? Breaking down carbon-based molecules. Again, um, most energy comes from carbohydrates. So not from water, not from molecules moving across the membrane. When you start breaking down, it's like digestion. That's kind of another way to say digestion. All right, this is what we call an energy pyramid or a food pyramid, where we look at producers or green plants. So it defines each of these for you. So that's again, it's important to study the diagram itself. So a producer consists of green plants. There are more green plants on the planet, so that's why they're at the bottom of the pyramid. And then primary consumers, again, plants make their own food, so that again, that's why they're at the bottom. And everybody else is a consumer because they have to take in their food. So primary consumers are the ones that eat the plants. Secondary consumers eat most of the time plants and animals. And tertiary consumers also eat plants and animals. They're usually the carnivores at the top. They tend to just eat animals, kind of thing. And on the side, they're telling you how much energy is required at each level. The When you see an energy pyramid like this or a food pyramid, um, it's also called a trophic pyramid. They always have a sun present, and the sun is always directed at the bottoms because that's the only level that is absorbing the energy. Every other level has to get its energy from the plants. So the primary consumer gets its energy from the plants. The secondary consumer gets some of that energy because the primary consumer uses some of it for its life functions. So the secondary consumer only gets 10% of what the original amount of energy was on the level before, because they in turn use some of the energy that they get by eating, they use it to run their life processes. So when the next level consumes them, they are only able to get 10% of their energy. So that's what these numbers on this side, as you see, are decreasing as get smaller and smaller as you go up the pyramid. All right, that being said, which of the following best estimate energy available to the tertiary one? It's going to be if on the secondary level is only they're looking at how much it kind of dropped each time, and it's going to be smaller than 0.041. So that's how you have to, if you're going to guesstimate without trying to do the math, it's got to be smaller than um, 0.041. And so the answer to that is going to be half of that, just about. So it's going to be A. Yeah, A. Right, so A is going to be about half of that. Technically, again, you lose 90% of the energy as you go up, because what's available for them. In other words, the organism uses 90%, it can give away 10%. So all that's left for the tertiary organism is 10% of what is available from the first one. So you want the smallest one possible, which equates to being um, I want to say 90. I don't want you to have to do math, but it has to be smaller than that one. And those are two. The other ones are B is too small and D is too big. Okay, so that's that one you'll just have to guesstimate on. They do have calculators for you, but I don't think you really have to use a calculator for that one. Just know that if they're giving you these numbers on the side, and notice what the difference is between each level, and then the next level will decrease by that same factor. All right. How does photosynthesis contribute to the carbon cycle? And remember that our equation for photosynthesis, uh, it moves. Okay. B. All right. It moves carbon from the atmosphere to the biosphere. All right. Remember the Earth is the biosphere. Carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, and the fact that it is absorbed by the plants makes it the plants are part of the biosphere. That's how we have to look at that. The hydrosphere is your water environment. Atmosphere is obviously the air, and it's not going from the soil to the atmosphere. In the soil, it is not carbon. So that D is just wrong altogether. All right. This is a food web. What a food web is represents all of the feeding relationships in a certain area. Sometimes we look at food chains, and so we're looking at um, just one single feeding relationship, and no organism lives in a area by itself. So there are always other organisms involved. Let me come back up here. We're kind of looking at this when you have a food chain. The food chain always starts with a producer, and then it comes the next thing in your food chain is a primary consumer, the thing that ate the plant, and then the next one on the line would be the thing that ate the plant, the animal that ate the plant, and then tertiary would be the animal that ate the plant. Okay. All right, so this is what we're looking at here, only this is more confusing. But notice if you start in the middle, all the arrows start in the middle with the red oak grass, and over here the star grass. So the bottom is still always a plant. And then the arrow goes to the thing that eats it. Okay, so the next level we have all the organisms that eat plants, but they're also connected to the organism that eats them. So you kind of have to follow the arrows in the direction from the plant to not kind of, you do have to follow the arrows in the direction of from where it starts at the plant to the next level and to the next until you get to the top and nobody's eating them because they are the um, what do you call it? They're the tertiary consumers. They're the apex consumers. There's a lot of words. So the apex means that they are the top of the pyramid. Nobody tends to attack them per se. Okay. All right. And then each of these is called a feeding level is a trophic level. So that's what that word is. They can also call, like I said, with the other one, they can call that a trophic pyramid as well. All right. The greatest amount of stored energy in this food web is which of the following? And the only thing that absorbs 100% of the energy is a plant. So all the ones at the bottom are 100% the greatest amount of stored energy. All the rest of these are getting what's left over. Every time they're getting what's left over. So the one that has the most energy is going to be your red oak grass. Okay, it could be the acacia trees, it could be the stargrass, but that's not a choice. But it's going to be a plant because what plants absorb 100% of the sun's energy. Okay, all the rest of these are not plants. All right, 75. Which of the following is a mechanism by which phosphorus in the soil enters the biosphere? Okay, it's going to be D. The plants have to absorb it from the soil, and the only way it's going to get out of the soil is for animals to consume it. Okay, so that's the way it's going to get into the rest of the biosphere. Animals have to consume the plants, and then it becomes part of their body, and then it can be shared by it can be eaten by other organisms, or they die and they return the phosphorus back to the soil. That's how that molecule travels. It doesn't get into the atmosphere. It's not a gas. All right, which of the following indicates, and this is going to be almost our last question, which of the following would indicate the greatest problem with health concerns in an ecosystem? And that's going to be it's going to be A, includes only a few kinds of plants and animals. So there's not much biodiversity there. It's limited. Okay. Uh, Let me see. Looking real quick because we got time for maybe one more. All right, all the rest of these. See, this one is one of those great. All right, so the rest of these have a lot to do with ecosystem. We did this one. That's a worksheet. This is genetics. Those are the triplet codes for your DNA. So again, the answer sheet is at the back of your page. See, back here you have all the answers. So all the ones I didn't get to, maybe you can look them up, but all the answers are there because it is time to go. All right, I wish you all much luck tomorrow. Study, 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 but don't study too hard. Just kind of relax and know that you're intelligent beings and you have the ability to make an educated guess. Okay, that's what an educated guess means, that you have some good background and you know how to decipher a right answer from a wrong answer, but take the time to do that. Okay? Good luck. Mm, okay. And again, Natalie, thank you for that. Hopefully y'all copied that link and you could look at that too.